Hey everyone, and welcome to Pathfinder Drum Corps lesson number 2. In this video, we will be discussing basic technique. Now, we will not be going over songs or even basic rudiments, just the fundamentals on how to hold and move the drumstick. Before we can start hitting drums, we need to know how to use the stick, specifically how do we hold it and how do we move it. A drummer does not grab a drumstick, a drummer controls a drumstick. The grip is loose, although not too loose or you're going to drop the stick. Now, if you grip the stick like you would a hammer, then the grip is way too tight. So let's start with basic technique and then how it applies on the snare drum. There are two different types of grip used in drum corps, matched grip and traditional grip. While there are different matched grips, we will only be using the German grip. The matched grip is where both hands have the same way they grip the stick. They match. In traditional grip, the right hand is the same as matched grip, but the left hand is very different. For German matched grip, the palm of each hand faces downward and the hands are level. If the thumbs are extended, they will point at each other. They should never point up or even at an angle. French grip is where the thumbs point straight up and the fingers are used more than the wrist. French grip is never used in drum corps because we need to use the power of the wrist movement in its natural manner. In German grip, the sticks should naturally fall at a 90-degree angle. If that angle is less than 90, extend your thumbs and likely they are not pointing at each other. Elbows should be in, no chicken dance while playing the drums. One way to verify the proper technique of German grip is to start with the hands empty and slap the drum head, or any surface, with the hand open. Once the hand is fully contacting the surface, then add a stick, but do not change the wrist angle. Gripping the stick should be done between the thumb and the middle finger. There is a very common grip where the stick is between the thumb and the index finger, but this has some limitations. Other professional drummers like Dave Weckl have elaborated on this and why the thumb to middle finger is more ergonomically beneficial. A drummer does not move the stick as much as they control the stick. There is little need to ever move the stick in an upward direction. Instead, you should take advantage of the free energy that will naturally move the stick upward. Watch what happens when I hit the drum, but leave my hand at the spot where I hit the head. Notice that not only does the stick bounce back, but it does so quickly and much farther than may actually be necessary. If I repeat this, I can use the free rebound energy so that I am only using my energy to move the stick downward. I am chasing it on the way up, not stopping it and then moving it upward. Here's what some people do incorrectly. When gripping with the thumb and index finger, it is easy to limit the movement of the stick. It is possible to have a more full stroke with a thumb to index finger grip. However, I find the ergonomics much better by using the thumb to middle finger. Plus, you have at least one finger on each side of the fulcrum to control the stick. By pivoting at the index finger, all fingers are on one side of the fulcrum. It's not a huge hindrance, but it does tend to result in a little bit of inefficiency. In traditional grip, there are differing views on the left hand position. Some have the palm facing straight up, while others have it facing to the right. So let's start with what they have in common. The pivot point will be the same, even though they may look different. On the drumsticks I use, there is an American flag, and I pivot at that point regardless of which grip or hand. So for match grip, it would look like this. And for traditional grip, I still use the flag, but I put it in the webbing between my thumb and index finger. From this position, the ring and pinky fingers are folded behind the stick, and the middle and index fingers are on top of the stick, all still loose and not restrictive to the movement of the stick. The differing views are that the left hand should be with the palm straight up, versus having the palm facing horizontal to the drum head. For me, my hand naturally falls like this, somewhere in between the two methods where the palm is sort of on a 45-degree angle, maybe a little less. The stick angles of traditional grip are a bit different than matched grip since there won't be a 90-degree angle of the sticks. The right hand does remain the same, but the left, as you can see, comes in differently. To use the left hand in traditional grip, the movements are mainly the rotation of the wrist and the movement of the thumb. There is some finger movement as well. I can use the free rebound energy to bring the stick back up and use only the thumb to move it downward. If I bring in the fingers and the wrist, I can get more power and of course more control. Add full arm motion and you have the same range of power and expression as the right hand. To get used to proper grip, especially matched grip, start by using only the fingers. Many drummers have trouble moving only the fingers and not moving the wrist when they first start. Some even exaggerate the grip by only grabbing the thumb and middle finger and leaving the other fingers far from the stick. You don't want the excessive grip like you are grabbing a hammer, nor the too loose grip or only gripping with the fulcrum. Using only the fingers forces you to grip at the fulcrum and to put your fingers in the correct location and move them. Once you can play with fingers only, then you can move to playing with the wrist. After that, you can add the forearm movements and so on up to the full shoulder movement. You can do the same thing for the left hand in traditional grip. Practice using just the fingers. Then practice using only the thumb with all of your fingers extended without moving your wrist. Then move up to full motion of the wrist, and then to the forearm and then the full arm. Being able to properly execute fingers only and wrist movements are among the most necessary parts of learning basic technique. Don't be too concerned if it takes a bit for you to get used to consistent movement at fingers only. Work on both, alternating between your hands as well as staying on the same hand. Technique on the multi-toms is always German grip, but there are some specific differences to the snare because the drum you are hitting is not centered directly in front of you. You start with standard German grip, but as you move your arms without twisting your torso, you can see that the sticks form a T shape when at the far left or far right toms and a little off-center on the middle ones. You are supposed to use tom mallets on the multi-toms instead of drumsticks. However, I still find myself occasionally using drumsticks. The multi-tom mallet is shorter and has a very different tip, which is harder. The benefit of the mallet is greater on the smaller drum, since the distance from the center of the head to the hoop is shorter. This requires a little more angle when using a drumstick to avoid hitting the hoop. It's not drastic, but it might be enough to require you to compensate. The harder tip also makes the stick rebound more noticeable, but it's somewhat offset by the shorter length. Bass drum technique is about the same as matched grip on the snare, except that your sticks are moving horizontally instead of vertically. First rule of bass drum playing is, do not hit both heads at the same time. You can use both sticks on the snare at the same time because you are hitting the same head. A drum is intended to have the air and the harmonics moving rapidly back and forth from one head to the other and back. Hitting both bass drum heads at the same time results in two air fronts meeting inside the drum, and the turbulence cannot escape the air hole fast enough, allowing the drum to breathe properly, so the heads are put under a much higher level of stress. One possible result of hitting both heads at the same time is damaging a head. Cymbals have a specific technique also. I've seen multiple instances where a cymbal was inverted while playing, and one way to avoid that is with proper technique. Now by inverted, I mean that it was bent back in the opposite direction. Instead of the cymbal bent slightly towards the other cymbal, it was bent back in the opposite direction, thus making it nearly impossible to create the proper sound. The proper cymbal technique is to play in somewhat of an X pattern, like this. The most common mistake in playing cymbals is to hit them straight on, like this. If you wish to silence the cymbals, you can touch them to your body like you would a chime. There are two different grips you may encounter on the cymbals. One style is a T-handle like this, and the other is with straps that wrap around the wrist. There are advantages and disadvantages of each. The T-handles are considered more entry-level, but also are frequently easier for new players as it's easy to figure out. On the downside, I find these handles need to be tightened after each time they are played for any length of time. The straps require much less maintenance, but if they do get untied, this will happen with little to no warning. When using a cymbal with the straps, grip the strap in the hand right up against the bell of the cymbal, but do not touch the bell as much as possible. The cymbal, however, should still not be able to flop around. If your grip makes a lot of constant contact with the cymbal itself, then you will be muting the cymbal while playing, and thus it will not ring for very long. The cymbal with the strap that I'm using in this video is actually too small a strap for my hand. I should be able to wrap it around my wrist and still have enough length to wrap my entire hand around the strap. Which brings up something we have to do sometimes in drum corps: compromise and improvise. So, this is what I do in this situation to improvise. The information in this video does not replace real in-person drum lessons. A qualified drum teacher can identify and help correct improper technique that someone may not see in themselves when learning from an online video. I recommend drum lessons to anyone that is starting out with drum corps to learn technique properly and to avoid having to unlearn bad habits later on. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and feel free to leave any feedback in the comment section of this video.